All right, enough for that. Let's get to some sports. And before our first topic was supposed to be some trade conversation. Before we get to that, Jason put out an article in The Athletic that's so long I couldn't even finish it yet, this morning, and it's about stadium. This is a conversation we've had before, but you have more information on this. Jason, obviously, last week on the show, I think it was, we talked about the possibility of them moving by the airport, but now we have new information about maybe something happening downtown after all, potentially.
Well, we'll see. I still think, and really the article is a lot of what we talked about on the show. It was just me finally sitting down and putting it in a form for my other employer.
Yes, that's right.
They kind of wanted something on it.
Yeah.
So it's going to be a battle over the next couple of years, I think, in terms of what they do with the stadium. And the city's been a little bit slow to come to the table. I think they've got other priorities and other things that they're looking at. And the Browns aren't really their number one concern right now because the lease has 4 years to go. But I've talked to people who build these things, who've been part of the projects. And they said, you have to go now. Like, you got to do this now. Now is the time. We're 4 years out from the end of the lease. And if you go look at Minnesota, when they built the Dome, they passed legislation in 2012 and the stadium opened in 2016, 4 years out. So now the question becomes, and really the story that I put out today was just like, hey, they're serious about this dome. Like, the Browns want a dome. And the idea of renovating on the lakefront is still possible because it costs a lot less, obviously, than building a new dome.
Sure.
And if they can't get the financing, then they're going to have to go back to renovating. But they're very much looking at trying to find a way to fund a dome. Jimmy was going to have to pay for half. We talked about that on the show. If what I've been told is between $2 and $2.5 billion with a B
For the whole project.
for the whole project.
Okay.
It's not a retractable roof. That's even more. So it would be a standard roof. It doesn't open and close. There are other ways to do it. Minnesota did a beautiful job. It's a transparent roof, and the doors actually open when the weather's nice.
I would assume they would do something like that.
Right?
Right?
Hopefully, you could do something.
Yeah.
Like
That won't be more of a cheaper route.
Well, the fixed dome is cheaper than, and opening a couple doors is cheaper than trying to build a retractable roof.
Right.
But I mean, you still got to come up with funding for over $1 billion.
Right.
And one of the sources of revenue that they're looking at is marijuana, because they haven't really figured out the tax structure yet around marijuana. So everybody wants their cut. Everybody's in line right now.
That's officially illegal? Like,
it is legal.
People are out.
Yes.
Enjoying.
People voted on it. Unfortunately, I know our state representatives are trying to mess with it.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
But the people of Ohio voted to make marijuana
So,
legal.
like today, they could go out and smoke freely and recreationally and be fine.
But
they haven't figured out the taxes on it yet, so they got to figure out the tax structure on it. Gambling, I think it should be sports gambling, and they've already doubled the tax rate on sports gambling. It's up to 20% now. I think you go back and take another bite of the apple, because if you want to make the argument of people who use it should pay for it, well, who uses the stadium more than sports bettors? If you're betting on sports, you're likely
Well, let me ask you this, Jason.
fan.
Clarify this. Okay. So right now, what's the tax on gambling?
20%, I believe.
So if you make a $10 bet, you're taxed. Like, who pays that $2 tax?
The DraftKings, FanDuel, that sort of thing.
Okay. So the fan doesn't actually do it.
But I mean, they could pass it down to the fan through fees and whatever else.
Right.
But as of now, no, not technically.
Okay.
But the companies do. But
so where's that tax money currently going? Do we know?
Education gets a chunk of it.
Yeah.
Gambling, addict classes,
Yeah.
Military veterans, all wonderful causes.
Right.
I would never allocate rerouting that money.
So
I put that in the story.
add to the tax.
Add to it.
Yeah.
Take more out of it, and you can go that route. And also, I want to make clear, like, I've heard a lot of comments this morning of, we'll just make Jimmy pay for it. I agree.
We all agree with that.
I put it in there. I wrote it. Like,
Yeah.
I support Jimmy can pay for the whole thing himself.
Yes.
Unfortunately, more times than not, that's not the reality. Other than Stan Kroenke in L.A., that really hasn't been. Now, that doesn't mean it's impossible, but short of, like, picking him upside down and shaking him by the ankles and shaking $2 billion out of his pockets, if he says no, what are you going to do? So you got to come up with alternatives.
Now, the city does have, well, not necessarily the city, but there is some leverage for at least the state, because the Browns can't move out of the state.
Absolutely. You would have to put them up for sale and make them available to. It's how Jimmy got the Columbus Crew.
Right.
It's state law was changed after Modell took the Browns to Baltimore. They changed state law so that before a team can leave the area, you have to make them available for purchase.
It was smart job.
It was brilliant. It was brilliant legislation.
Yeah.
So from that standpoint, yes, the state has leverage.
Right.
But if you tell them we're not going to give you a dime, go pay for it yourself. I don't know where this
right.
thing
Ultimately,
falls.
you could say, well, nobody else is going to want to own a team too if they have to have a crappy stadium.
Yeah.
So unfortunately, taxpayer money should never go to stadiums. But it always does. That's the reality. We can rail against it if we want.
I think there's a difference, and I think Justin Bibb was really smart in coming out and saying we're not using general fund money.
Agreed.
I think that was a smart strategy move. But and I agree that you shouldn't raise taxes on Cuyahoga County residents or Cleveland or anything like that. But I don't see if you're taxing marijuana, if you're taxing gambling, and a big part of the story I put out was what they did in Minnesota with these electronic pull tab games. Now, gambling is not legal in Minnesota, so that's a little bit of a difference.
Lottery is, I guess.
Well, I mean, there's a state lottery,
right?
But like, there's no casinos. It's all Indian tribal.
So how did they get away with the pull tabs?
It's through charities. So charities more or less sponsor these electronic pull tab games. The charities pay the tax and keep the profits. So charities have made tens of millions of dollars off this. Minnesota made so much money doing this that they paid off $350 million in state bonds 20 years early. Like, it was a huge success in Minnesota.
So in theory, we could have a charity. I mean, we could, in theory, have, a charity helping homeless people.
Yes.
And all the money most of it would go there, and then the taxes would go to pay for the stadium, which is a win-win.
Yeah, and these games are like, they're on iPads, at least in Minnesota. It's an iPad tied to, you can only gamble on it.
Right.
And it's like it's almost like a slot machine on an iPad.
Yeah.
And you can bet 50 cents a dollar up to $5. The most popular games I was told are $1, $2 games. And you just sit while you're drinking and you're out with friends or whatever, you just sit there and you gamble.
Yeah.
And the taxes on that, the money goes to charity, and then the charities are taxed, and that tax revenue goes to stadiums.
What's the downside on that?
The downside is, what if it doesn't work?
If it's not enough. So
and
how much did they make in Minnesota? Do you know the number by any chance?
It's in the article. I don't remember off the top of my head, but I know that they made enough. The state bonds were $350 million, and they paid it off after 10 years. They paid it off 20 years early, and it's still a booming business. It's still, and now they're arguing over what to do with the money now.
Right. Well, and now listen, you wouldn't make as much money in Cleveland as you would in Minneapolis is a bigger city. It's a wealthier city.
It's statewide.
Yeah.
And it wouldn't all go to Cleveland. Like, Cincinnati's going to get a cut.
I guess you'd have to put something in the legislation that if you don't reach the number by a certain year, we're going to take 5% tax on marijuana or whatever it is.
It's 30 years. I mean, you would do it over 30 years. That's what Minnesota did. They had great success with it. But you do it over 30 years. And I spoke to the president of the company that builds the games in Minnesota. And he said Ohio would have to raise its tax. Right now they don't tax. The tax isn't very high on the charity gambling.
Yeah.
So you have to raise the tax on that. And other than that, I think it's feasible. Like, I don't see a reason why. Now, you can make the argument gambling is already legal in Ohio. Minnesotans don't have legalized gambling. That's why the pull tabs are so popular, because you can't go to a casino. And the gaming industry is going to push back hard on this if they try and do this.
Right.
Because their fear is they're going to take money away from Jack Casino down the street and everything else.
Yeah.
And the president I talked to, his argument was, this is a completely different crowd. If you're going to go to the casino and gamble, you're going to go to the casino and gamble. These are people going to their local bar, having a couple drinks.
I don't think it affects.
And you're sitting there gambling
I
while
agree
you're
with
sitting
him.
there.
I agree.
Yeah,
with him.
it's a different.
Last
setting.
thing on this, how much Ohio? The state of Ohio, I believe, wasn't it $8 billion in gambling last year?
7.
6.
I thought it was 7.
Okay, let's even say it's 6. So 20% of that. It was a 20% tax.
Yeah.
So 20% of $6 billion.
I screwed up math yesterday. I don't want to even take a stab at this today.
The Dayton Daily News I cited, and I don't have it in front of me.
Yeah.
Through October, how much money Ohio had pulled in taxes?
Yeah.
$102 million just through October in taxes.
$102 million
off gambling.
Off gambling.
Yeah.
And that's with a 20% tax.
Yeah.
$102 million in 1 year.
Yeah, through October. That's not even
through
a full
October
year.
in 10 months. So let's say you added another 10% tax that strictly goes to the stadium.
Yeah.
All right, 10%. Let's say it would have been 50. That would have been an extra $50 million in 10 months. In 5 years, you're talking like 300. Probably in 15 years, that's $1 billion.
Theoretically.
Yeah.
And
off of just the gambling. That's a 5% tax. An addition, if my math is correct, an additional 5% tax on sports gambling over 15 years would raise about $1 billion, I think.
I don't know. I'd have to.
Am my numbers off with that?
I don't want to try and play the numbers.
Anyway,
game.
It sounds feasible, and that's only a 5% tax on sports gambling without marijuana, without
really
the
you're
pull
trying
tabs.
you got to try and double what Minnesota did.
Yeah,
because Minnesota raised 350. You really need to try and raise $700 million minimum.
Yeah, you're right.
In funding to pull this off.
That's fascinating. Everybody check out Jason's article in The Athletic if you want more information. So there you go. All right, let's send it to Mikey McNuggets.
And not just Jason's article, but tonight, the Ultimate 216 makes its second episode, and Earl's going to be talking in depth about what the city should do about the stadium situation, who should pay, who should be on the hook for it, and that conversation based off Jason's article will continue tonight with Earl the Pearl at 5 o'clock on the Ultimate 216 show. The link's already up there. You can click the notify me button for when Earl goes live, but make sure y'all check out the Ultimate 216 show tonight at 5 p.m.